So I just finished recording an episode on Viktor Frankl and his book, Man's Search for Meaning. This is an incredibly profound piece of work. This is describing Viktor Frankl's time in the Nazi concentration camps and the sources of meaning and fulfillment and actualization that Frankl was able to arrive at in these most arduous of circumstances. So many people have described Maslow's hierarchy of needs as being quite Eurocentric and privileged in its method of construction. So looking at this here, we can see that Abraham Maslow was a psychologist who studied positive human qualities and the lives of exemplary people. So the method that Frankl used to arrive at this structure in this model was to study the people that were already successful and figure out what they did to get to that place. And of course he was studying people like CEOs, business owners, and people that were successful by social standards given that time and the zeitgeist that they occupied at that time. So in this video we're going to examine some of Frankl's propositions and see how they line up with and contradict the hierarchy of needs here. So firstly we have this baseline fundamental level, our physiological needs, our breathing, our food, water, sex, sleep, homeostasis, and ability to have access to a restroom. So in most places, breathing is not so much restricted, but our access to food and water, like we should have this guaranteed now. Honestly, this is a bit of a commentary on politics as well here, but in the 21st century, in one of the most successful countries in the world, we can't guarantee people to have access to food and water. I mean, you have to live near one of the bigger cities to have guaranteed access to these resources, and they're not going to be good. To qualify for food stamps, for example, this is not an easy process, and there are many levels and restrictions to being able to access these benefits. To be able to establish homeostasis is also quite complex, and to have these baseline fundamentals provided for is how we arrive at that. Having a guaranteed place to sleep at night and put your head on a comfortable pillow, we still can't provide that. This is usually accessed in the major cities in the US, or the bigger cities, where homeless shelters are not completely overcrowded or even exist at all. When I was homeless myself for a year or so, I definitely was more free than ever. There's never a more free experience in one's life to be able to not be under the thumb of the system or whatever, or not have to pay bills and be so tied to money. I do very much feel that money is quite unnatural. It's something that we struggle to align with. A lot of people do. Some people get on with it easier than others, but a lot of what we do is worshiping this dollar in the US, and that's very unhealthy, and that's not a system that elucidates and edifies eudaimonia and promotes human flourishing. It's more like this is a system for the healthy. This is a system for people that are already in a state of privilege, and that's how they reach self-actualization. And of course, Viktor Frankl was able to reach a well-honed state of actualization and fulfillment and self-confidence and gratitude and wonder in his decrepit state when he was deprived of food and water for days on end, and he reported having to share one blanket with 3 people, huddling together for warmth in the cold. Just a horrible situation, and yet he was still able to be the kind of person that he wanted to be in that situation and retain his identity. So moving up to the concept of having guaranteed safety, this is where the shelter and the home is so important. The ability to have a place that you can call home and call your own. Getting to the idea of feng shui, or the idea of having a sanctuary, a place that is reciprocally beneficial to us and is also edifying our best selves. We customize our homes to reflect our best intentions and what we desire and what we enjoy. And when you don't have that can cause a lot of setbacks in your ability to align with yourself and with society. But of course, Frankl did not have that either, and he was able to find himself there and become one with himself. So security of body and being secure in the body that you have, this is getting better, and in some cases it's getting worse, depending on who you ask. We are encouraging people to embrace the bodies they have, but at the same time, in psychology, we're encouraging people to reject their bodies and that whole line of thinking. I won't get into that here. So security of employment, this is getting better in the US. We now offer 6 different employment agencies and temp services. I think Express Employment has 400 locations around the country. So if you want a job and you want an occupation, you can get it. Getting a career is a different story. And getting a job where you feel fulfilled is also very rudimentary and lackluster here in the US, because most people are working as robots or doing jobs that will be replaced by robots in the near future. And that's extremely unfulfilling. And when we look at establishing a sense of purpose and self-worth and contribution to the tribe, that's not going to be had in a warehouse job, I'm sorry to say. Security of resources has also improved and also has become much more restricted, only to people that the government and the governing bodies seem to dictate. I have a friend who's legally blind, and he is limited to the amount of money that he can make every year if he wants to qualify for disability. So if he wants to take advantage of these resources and live an actualized life, or at least experience some kind of human flourishing, he's only allowed to make so much money. That is a system for failure, and that is extremely judgmental, and again exemplifying the fact that this is a country for the healthy. It's a country for the mentally well and the physically well. And so this gets at the concept of security of health and having a well-established baseline sense of health. And well, the healthcare system of the United States is ranked 28th worldwide, and yet we have the best doctors and the best medical equipment in the world. This is the capitalist paradigm is just completely screwing the working class in this regard. It's so sad because there are so many people that suffer chronic illnesses and invisible illnesses that will not be able to lead the kind of lives that they want. It would be much, much harder for them when we could be doing so much better, but I won't say too much about that for now. And so these bottom tiers here, I think these are going to make things a lot easier for people to reach these states of flourishing and self-confidence and self-awareness and all that. Ideally, you would have a secure sense of family and a peer group and or education system that would teach you self-awareness practices and ways to bring you into the version of yourself that you want to be. But that seems to be very lacking as well in the US, because we don't teach that to the parents that are supposed to be teaching that to their kids. And we have a long history of just teaching STEM fields or educating people in content that is just very much not informing people on how to live and how to be introspective. So ideally we would have a sense of love and belonging in the tribe and a sense of contribution and connection to those around us. This includes friendship, family, and sexual intimacy. And of course, all of these were deprived of the people in the concentration camps, and yet Frankl was still able to arrive at a sense of actualization there. And my goal in examining this model here is not to say that this is not necessary at all. I'm trying to say that these are structures that we could be forming in society that would make it much easier for people to arrive at these states. I believe Frankl, due to his prior training, or at least his natural innate sense of self-awareness, he was able to turn the tables on a situation and make the best of it. So ideally the kind of friendships we would have are those that would be reciprocally edifying, would be encouraging and uplifting us, and they would also be the friends that would be teaching how to instill these qualities in ourselves and instill self-awareness and actualization for ourselves. The kind of friends that we're now seeing in the US are, well, we're kind of falling into political groups and dichotomizing and polarizing based on particular preferences and likes and dislikes. And so we're creating the in-group, out-group mindset, and we're kind of like falling into little tribes in the digital internet space, as opposed to genuine interactions with other people. And what Frankl was getting at in Man's Search for Meaning is the ability to form friendships on a whim, to be in a state of awareness and self-awareness where we can indeed reach out and connect with anyone and be willing to bridge across this divide and bridge across our political divides and our differences of opinions. And so we can establish a sense of love and belonging with anyone that we encounter. We want to be in the state of unconditional love and a state of belonging with the tribe. And again, we've come very far from the tribes that we used to occupy, where we were in groups of the Dunbar number of 150 people or so. We had kind of a guaranteed shelter. We could, going back to this idea of having security of property, we used to just be able to build a house wherever we want, and now we're just simply not allowed to do that. So we're kind of like cutting people off at certain levels now, and it's very unproductive. Counterintuitive. So going higher up the pyramid here, we have a sense of self-esteem, establishing confidence and a sense of achievement, being respected by others and having respect for others. All of these are values and virtues that can be established from the worst of conditions. We don't have to have this prior levels here to reach these kind of states. Certainly Viktor Frankl formed a good sense of self-esteem in his writing. So he was writing a book during this time on scraps of paper in these concentration camps. Obviously, he felt some form of achievement from that, and was feeling a sense of confidence during this process, and was feeling that he could face adversity in the ultimate face of adversity. And of course, other people noticed this, and he gained a lot of respect from those suffering around him. And he uplifted other people by sharing his message and sharing what he had learned from these experiences. And at the top here, we have self-actualization. So what are some interpretations of actualization? Being an actual human, living a genuine, authentic life. And so what is authenticity? Well, a lot of people say that is the opposite of being fake. It's being real and being a genuine version of yourself. And that's the aim. That's what we want to bring out in people with the process of therapy, is to bring them to their best selves and to establish a sense of self-confidence and a sense of self-awareness and introspective capacities that come about quite naturally. We want people to be able to feel comfortable in the moment, in different moments, in different areas. But you don't have to have this structure underlying that to arrive at that. Now, ideally, people would figure this out on their own, and there are problems with free will and the concept that people need to be taught how to use their brains. We talk a lot about this on the channel. And there's a lot of truth to that, but that's not true for everyone. Like, everybody's brain is different in this ability. So from this perspective, the pyramid is kind of deterministic in nature, kind of insinuating that without these properties, without being taught and having been brought up in an edifying and educational environment and a loving environment, then people will not arrive at these values, and they won't be able to actualize on their best selves. And, well, that's not accurate, fortunately. And so we have the concept of arriving at a sense of morality. And again, our senses of morality, well, since the Age of Enlightenment, this has been very much crumbled and transformed into obsession over the dollar and the worshiping of the dollar as opposed to what we used to worship, which was religion, and that decided our morals for us. So now our morals are more based around superficiality and ego stroking and financial wealth and material gain and social status symbols. And this is rampant on social media. Social media is very much exacerbating this problem, and, well, they're trying to regulate it, and how do you even do that? Like, that seems like a fruitless endeavor. We will ideally at all of these stages be able to establish a sense of creativity. And so this is another thing I noticed when I was homeless, when I didn't have any of this. The people that I talked to during those times were some of the most creative and expressive individuals I've ever met. There was one person I met in Eugene, Oregon, who spoke only in rhymes, and he did it very well. He was very expressive and very much in touch with himself. And so some people might consider this as instability or mentally unstable and ill. And that again that's based on a stereotype of what all brains should be like. This is the false equivalence fallacy, equivocating all brains to a particular standard of expression. And it's like saying that qualifies as art and that doesn't, and that's not how art works. I mean, going off of Otto Rank's definitions of art and the will to expression in that regard, there are countless ways to arrive at creative expression. Some of the best art comes from some of the worst travesty. Some of the most disturbed and negatively impacted people and traumatized people create some of the best works of fiction, movies, and paintings, and people value that. And so this category of spontaneity, we certainly see this in the homeless community as well, and at all stages and classes, if we want to use those kind of terms, that people can be spontaneous and confident in what they're doing in any situation, especially in a Nazi concentration camp, as Frankl exemplified in his book. What Maslow's getting at here is the idea of having an ability to be spontaneous and confident and say the right things at the right times around all social groups. And that probably does take a little bit more training. And that's where a lot of these stages will become quite beneficial. And so arriving at a problem-solving mindset, again, I've seen this all throughout the homeless community, and I've seen this in Frankl's writing here. Viktor Frankl used his problem-solving ability. He tapped into his cognitive ability to navigate the problem space, as it's called in CogSci, to solve for the problem of being in a Nazi concentration camp and do what he can within that space, giving his limited resources. There's other quotes that circle around this idea of like constraints yield affordances, and the less resources we have, the more creative we can be. And so this is where I kind of see this as a little bit of a biased model in this way. So arriving at a lack of prejudice, this one I do see more so from an educated and well-nurtured childhood and a healthy education system, because there are so many deterministic and evolutionary instincts towards prejudice, and we can't deny this. I mean, we like to think that we've transcended our evolutionary biology and all that, but that's not how it works. We're still extremely primal, and we go to war, like we kill people over ideologies, and we rally together on the most rudimentary of values, where we prejudge situations because the brain is a prediction machine. It does predictive processing as one of its main functions, and a lot of that concerns symbolic representation and categorization and the compartmentalization processes of the brain. And when we don't teach people how to navigate that and how to transcend those primal instincts and those forms of problem solving, then we could end up solving for the wrong problems, and we could end up trying to prejudice people and put people into boxes. And of course, here we have the acceptance of facts. Well, of course, this is what Frankl was dealing with at his most lowest point in these Nazi concentration camps. The acceptance of your fate and the acceptance of the situation that you're occupying, that is the root of acceptance and commitment therapy. And that is the root of the Buddhist concept of dukkha as well. 2,500 years ago, people came up with this concept, and the Buddha, or Siddhartha Gautama, before he became the Buddha, he was led by his father, so goes the story, through the town that he occupied, and he was exposed to various travesties, and like old age and people begging and that kind of thing, and he had spent his life in a temple and had never been exposed to these things, and so he sat under the Bodhi tree for however long, and he came to realize that one of the things that we have to accept in life is suffering and the acceptance of our situation. And this is exactly what Frankl was tapping into. This is exactly what he was able to recognize quickly and accept and work with as a baseline fundamental of life. And so that I would include down here at the bottom if we were to rearrange this structure here. So I hope this has made sense. What I'm trying to emphasize here is that this model is extremely useful, and this is what we need to be aiming at if we're going to design a properly cohesive society, a social system that is working towards eudaimonia and not just working towards profit. That's what you get with capitalism and or consumerism, however you want to define these terms. I mean, we could debate semantics on that, but it seems pretty obvious to me that these are the priorities, and these are the fundamentals that we should be trying to provide. But because they're not marketable and because we cannot make money off of those, we're not doing that. We're not educating people in self-awareness. We're not educating people in how to secure themselves in a world that is traumatizing and potentially exacerbating of conditions. And instead, we're trying to make money by selling pills to people and keep people dumb and numb. And numb in the way from the psychology perspective, and dumb in the way of not teaching people real values in the education system. If we were able to teach people how to introspect and teach people to think for themselves, what's the quote? It's, we teach people what to think and not how to think, not how to use their brains. That's the exams, and that's the SAT method. It's like there's a thing circulating around the internet, like a meme that says, well, I sure know that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, and that's it. It's like I had to go online for the majority of what I learned as valuable learning. I didn't really, personally, my story is that it wasn't until 27 or 28 that I really began to get a grasp on what it is to be a human in the world and understand myself and be secure in myself and become confident, to work on my speech abilities, to work on my social interaction abilities. None of that was taught to me in the public education system. So there's a quote going around that we keep people sick and stupid, and that's the way to keep a functional society, but it's not going to be a happy society. The medical system is based on this ideology that every patient cured is a customer lost. Like, what a horrible system we have. We don't promote actual healing. We don't fund a real healthcare system. If we were to teach people to think for themselves, then they would not become the cogs in the machine under which this incredibly superficial and entertainment-based economy is structured upon. And so there are many incentives for this lack of government funding towards better education and better healthcare and better psychological healthcare. So a well-informed mind does not a good cog of the machine make. Anyways, I'll get off my soapbox now. I really appreciate you watching this video. I hope I've communicated these ideas in a clear and cohesive fashion. Thanks so much for your time and attention, and if you feel this video has been valuable, feel free to subscribe and share this with other people that you find it would benefit from it. Thanks so much, y'all. See you in the next one. And so Frankl goes on to later challenge more of the whole hierarchy of needs narrative. He says, "I wish to stress that the true meaning of life is to be found in the world rather than within man or his own psyche, as though it were a closed system. By the same token, the real aim of human existence cannot be found in what is called self-actualization. Human existence is essentially self-transcendence rather than self-actualization.